Hello, everyone. How can data and collaboration redefine what's possible in medicine? Welcome back to Date with Tech in this amazing episode. In this session, we explore how research data is fueling biomedical breakthroughs. We shared knowledge, technology, and AI work together to save lives. Joelle opens the discussion, followed by Helen Berman, who reveals how the protein data bank became a cornerstone of global biomedical discovery. Barbara Mittleman highlights how the Biomarkers Consortium bridges research and real-world outcomes. And Paul Beninger explains how FHIR standards are powering data interoperability across healthcare systems. Joelle, over to you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to welcome you also to session 2. Here, with the focus on biomedical, as you've heard, we're going to look at 3 case examples, each of which illustrates how to take these ideas of lateral alignment and apply them in the case of biomedical, the biomedical frontier, really. Once again, the overarching message of this 3-part series is that there are global challenges that exceed what any one organization or institutional actor can do, and with multi-stakeholder consortia of various kinds, people can accomplish together what they can't do separately at a time of accelerating change. I'm delighted to introduce, as our first guest, one of the founders of the Protein Data Bank, Helen Berman. Helen?
Thank you, Joel. I'm Helen Berman. I'm a professor emerita at Rutgers University, and I'm a distinguished professor now at University of Southern California. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit is the Protein Data Bank, which was established in 1971 to archive all the structures of proteins. The proteins are the machines that do all the work in our body, and the premise is that structure determines function. Now there are close to 250,000 highly curated entries of data into the Protein Data Bank. And these highly curated data enable the successful prediction of protein structure by AlphaFold in 2020, thereby earning the Nobel Prize to the people who did that. Next slide. The Protein Data Bank came as a result of the fact that the first structures of proteins were done in the 50s. A group of people decided there needed to be some kind of repository. That repository was set up at Brookhaven National Lab in collaboration with Cambridge Structural Database in England with 7 structures. And so at the beginning, the stakeholders were basically the people who were determining the structures. At some point, there were guidelines for deposition set up by an international committee. Then another international working group set up a new kind of representation for the data. And then the PDB moved from Brookhaven to a new consortium consisting of 3 groups from Rutgers, San Diego, and NIST, recognizing formally that there needs to be a global organization. We formed what's called the Worldwide Protein Data Bank with partners in the United States, Europe, and Japan. And then most recently, new methodologies that had been developed over the years for structure determination necessitated bringing in more kinds of archives, including electron microscopy, NMR, and so on. So we started with a very small informal organization with not too many rules to a very large international group of people who were stewarding the data now for more than 50 years. Next slide. As I said, we started out with basically just the people who created the data. We now have the stakeholders are people from university, industry, other data repositories, publishers, funders, pharmaceutical drug developers make heavy use of the PDB, professional society, students, and patients. And what we saw is that there was a co-evolution and synergy of the science, the PDB, and the stakeholders. So we have various kinds of working groups that deal with the data curation standards, ways in which you can access the data. There's the evolving protein science, which is now going faster and faster, thanks, in fact, to AlphaFold. And then there are evolving publication requirements, starting with there was no requirement to, you cannot publish a structure in a journal without putting it into the data repository. It's, of course, very international, and the data are used for creating new kinds of tests and therapies in medicine. So that's my story about the PDB.
Thank you, Helen. And in this case and the others you'll see, we do break things out by who are the stakeholders and what are the interests. And that is get back to those core building blocks that Susan shared in her model. But the Protein Data Bank is really a remarkable institution, a 50-year-old success story for lateral alignment. We're going to turn now to Paul Beninger with a more current initiative, but that also illustrates the need for lateral alignment. Paul?
Great, thank you, Joel. So I'm Paul Beninger, professor of public health and community medicine at Tufts University School of Medicine in Boston, Massachusetts. My comments concern healthcare and the standard called FHIR, which stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource. We see here a representative set of collaborative and competing interests in healthcare: patients, hospital systems, state and federal agencies, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical companies. Next slide, please. We see on this slide that there's a breathtaking range of activities, from patients to healthcare agencies, from doctor's notes to laboratory test results, EKGs and MRI images, from billing to private public payments, from adverse event reports associated with the use of drugs to compliance reporting, from patient access to professional record management, from patient record confidentiality to system cybersecurity, each with regulatory requirements, tech platforms, and standards that must be kept current in the highly dynamic tech environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Again, a powerful example with a complex mix of stakeholders and interests, literally doing together what can't be done separately. Our third case example is Barbara Mittleman, who was one of the founding architects of what's called the Biomarkers Consortium. Barbara?
Hi, I'm a physician scientist, spent most of my career at the National Institutes of Health in the US and have been in industry since 2013. So part of what you've been hearing in every presentation is that data is at the core. In the biomedical world, data is a very varied thing. Paul just told you about many of the data types that exist. And what he didn't tell you about is that this is also a regulated environment. And so that the transfer of information, what kind of information can be shared, with whom can it be shared, for what purposes can it be shared, is under very strict regulatory regimes in pretty much every part of the world. The regimes are not the same in every part of the world, but it's important to be compliant with them. And to work with government on any kind of data sharing means really understanding what those regulations are for both government and for non-governmental players, trying to figure out how to manage that without getting anybody in jail. There are civil and criminal penalties for misuse of data, and one doesn't want to run afoul of them. Anything in the biomedical world is, as I said, both regulated, but it's also a very competitive environment. And there are a lot of stakeholders, and some are bigger and more complicated in terms of their structure, internal decision-making processes, and reward systems than others. The Biomarkers Consortium is one example of a multi-stakeholder consortium in this regulated environment, and its goal was to make pre-competitive, which is to say not to make IP, but to make pre-competitive tools for drug development. The structure of the Biomarkers Consortium is something you can find online at the biomarkersconsortium.org. But there were a number of different therapeutic areas, there were a number of different communities. Unlike the Protein Data Bank, this started with a huge amount of structure from the outset. And when you design a structure before you actually start operating a consortium, you have to build in the opportunity to refine the structure, because your best guesses early on about what will work may or may not in reality work. It depends very much on who the people in the consortium are and how they operate together. It also depends on who the component organizations are and how they work together. It's important when you have large players in a consortium that within the individual components that there is also lateral alignment. Drug companies, for example, are often large, have many layers of decision-making opportunities, and if the person who is the representative to the consortium has no power and cannot be heard inside their own organization, it's very hard to get the organization aligned. So it's got to have alignment within the organization before you have alignment of the organization within the consortium. It's also, these things are complicated to put together and they take a lot of work. And the outcome has to be worth all that effort. So this is one of the things that has to be assessed early on and on a continual basis during the consortium. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the effort really worth the outcome? There are a lot of things that come out of these consortia. One of the things that comes out of them, one hopes, is what the consortia was designed for. But there's also very much a culture change that happens since many of these organizations are used to working alone. So learning to work together and figuring out how to do that, how not to lose their identities as individual organizations, but how to work effectively in a consortium is a big task. And the culture change comes along with relationship building. So that if one consortium can work, oftentimes those same players can go on and become members of other consortia and develop new structures that can do more things. So it's important to think, as everyone has been telling you, who are the stakeholders? Why does it matter to them? What will they get out of it? What are their operational constraints and what are their timelines? What are their reward systems? Because these are complicated and effortful to put together, people won't come unless it's worth it to them, and they won't stay unless it's worth it to them. So this is part of the ongoing assessment and refinement of the consortium as it goes along. There's much more that can be said, but I don't have more time, so I hope this has given you some tools to think about this. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Barbara. This has been a journey into 3 different case examples. One over 50 years old, the Protein Data Bank. 2 more recent, the Biomarkers Consortium is over a decade old. And what's happening with the sharing and reuse of healthcare records of many different kinds is still early days, but absolutely essential in the world in which we live. And in each case, what you've seen is that different combinations of stakeholders on different groups of interest achieved sufficient alignment to do together what they couldn't do separately. Shadi, back to you.
Thank you, Joelle, Helen, Barbara, and Paul. That was very insightful. This session showed how data actually can be the lifeblood of innovation in healthcare. Helen revealed how the Protein Data Bank opening new frontiers in structural biology. That was great. Barbara showed how the Biomarkers Consortium connects research to real-world outcomes. Paul demonstrated how FHIR standards bring data together across systems. Together, they prove that when collaboration meets technology, biomedical progress moves faster. Up next, we'll explore what it takes to form and sustain powerful research data consortia that stands the test of time. Thank you, everyone, and see you in the next episode. Thank you.